Jim McGowan, and we're going to do, Brother Jim, today something we started last week entitled America on the Brink. This will be part 2. And we're just going to get right back into the situation because we know more now of what happened on November 3rd and the aftermaths of it. You remember the last time we talked about how everybody went to bed thinking Donald Trump had been elected President of the United States or re-elected President of the United States, and then mysteriously, the votes stopped getting counted in, I think, at least 5, maybe more, swing states. And suddenly votes started to appear, and it looked like Trump was going to win all those states.
It did.
Suddenly those states started to bring in votes that went the other direction. And in my view, and what we're going to be exposing today, is those votes were basically manufactured. And essentially what's going on now is we believe that there's been a voter fraud committed. This is a narrative that the elites don't want you to believe, but we believe it to be true. And essentially what has to happen now is there has to be a recount. So we're now, a week and a half after the November 3rd election, where there's got to be a separation between legal and illegal ballots. That's the process that we're in now. And everybody says, well, why doesn't Trump just concede and so forth? Well, Al Gore held everything up in 2000 based on one state, or really 3 counties within that one state. And he did that for 37 days, and I think it's reasonable for Trump to do it in 5 or more states, since the election hangs in the balance. And the fact of the matter is newsrooms and the AP and Facebook and Twitter, they do not call elections. Okay, they think they do, but they don't.
They want to.
And the fact is that they certainly want to. The fact of the matter is an election is not called until the votes are separated, legal from illegal, until you have the right tally. And some states, when there's a very small margin like what we have now, there's an automatic recount. And that process has to work. And only then, after you get an accurate tally, can a state certify their votes, have an elector who then represents them in the Electoral College. And that doesn't happen until mid-December. So all of these people that are calling Biden the president-elect are ignoring the process, and they're ignoring the United States Constitution. And they're basically banking on you, Mr. and Mrs. America out there, your lack of understanding of civics to pull this off. You can't do this in a society that knows how the government works. You have to do it in an ignorant society. And this is one of the reasons why the educational system has played down civics.
That's it.
And played down a knowledge of the Constitution.
That's exactly right.
Because it's easier to manipulate and deceive people like this. So what is happening right now is literally a narrative war. We are not in a physical war, at least not yet, but we're in a narrative war. And 2 sides are struggling regarding who's going to control this narrative. And the one narrative is Biden won, he's the president-elect, Trump is a sore loser. Let's close the books, let's close the page, and let's move on. That's how one side wants you to think. The other side says, no, this process hasn't worked itself out yet, and we're a long way from this being over. So that's the narrative war that's going on. And a lot of people out there that maybe they don't like Trump's personality, etc., I would encourage them with this exhortation. This really doesn't have anything to do with Trump. Okay. Just take Donald Trump's name and take it out of the equation. To me, the issue is so much bigger than, is Donald Trump going to be our president for 4 more years? Personally, I hope he is. But the issue is bigger than that. The issue is, are we going to have free and fair elections starting with this election forward? Or will the prior election cycle, 2016, be our last free and fair election? And if we're not going to have free and fair elections in this country, then we might as well call ourselves a banana republic And we got to stop saying we're the leader of the free world.
Start passing out straw hats, right?
That's
Banana
right.
Republic.
That's right. And we're no longer a free state, but we're a slave state. Okay. So that's why we are continuing on with this subject.
Sorry, I just had to say
No,
that.
that's good.
Apologize.
People need a little comic relief every once in a while. So here is our preview slide, America on the Brink. You notice there we've got 7 things we're going to try to tick through rapidly as we get into this subject again today. But let's start here, Brother Jim, with our first one, globalism versus nationalism. And what I want people to really see, and the reason there's so much conflict over this is it's an issue bigger than Republican versus Democrat.
Yes.
And it's an issue bigger than liberal versus conservative. Most of the news outlets frame the issue that way, but it's way bigger than that. It has to do with globalism versus nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
And the elites, particularly since the advent of COVID, have been pushing us into a global reset paradigm.
Yes.
In fact, we have Time Magazine. We actually have a picture of their cover on Time Magazine. And their cover is entitled, they devoted a whole issue to this,
Yeah.
The Great Reset. And we're going to read in just a moment from an article by Patrick Delaney from LifeSiteNews.com. The title of it is Time Magazine Announces the Great Reset to Usher in World Socialism. The subtitle for the Time feature proposes a special occasion of the present moment for such an initiative, asserting the COVID-19 panic has provided a unique opportunity to think about the kind of future we want, to share ideas for how to transform the way we live and work. And I'm quoting this, or we're quoting this, to show you the paradigm that these folks are pushing us into, and to show you that Donald Trump is right in the way of this. In fact, if Donald Trump is given 4 more years, he's going to continue to be a thorn in the side of this agenda, and that's the reason for the fraudulent behavior. Okay, so go ahead and read that paragraph to us if you could.
All right. Time Magazine has devoted an entire issue to promoting an initiative called the Great Reset, referred to by one commentator as the Green New Deal on steroids, which will seek to advance socialist ideals, including the destruction of capitalism and individual rights. According to the World Economic Forum, the primary sponsor of the initiative, the Great Reset seeks to address an urgent need for global stakeholders to cooperate in simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, with an expanded goal of improving the state of the world. The subtitle for the Time feature proposes a special occasion of the present moment for such an initiative, asserting, quoting, the COVID-19 pandemic has provided a unique opportunity to think about the kind of future we want, to share ideas for how to transform the way we live and work, close quote.
See, the real threat, and we've covered this with many, many shows prior, is not the virus.
Right.
But it's what they're doing to supposedly rid the world or protect us from the virus.
Right.
The globalist structure, that's being built. And we've gone into a great amount of detail talking about this group, the WEF, or the World Economic Forum. And that's what they want. They're pushing world government.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't have Trump around because he's pushing nationalism.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a conflict here concerning these votes. Now, one of the leaders of this whole movement is a man named Klaus Schwab. And we have this article here from ZeroHedge.com by Tyler Turden, 11/11/2020. The title of it, and this is what Schwab, one of the leaders in the World Economic Forum, said, "The world will never," that's a direct quote from his book, "will never return to normal until after COVID." I mean, didn't they say, just 2 weeks?
Yeah.
and we grudgingly agreed to that. Well, what are we on now? 8 months or something like that, approaching 8 months,
Yeah.
and no end in sight. And if these people have their way, there never will be an end in sight. People will always be forced to wear these masks. And so what does that article say from Zero Hedge?
All right. In his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, World Economic Forum globalist Klaus Schwab asserts that the world will never return to normal, despite him admitting that coronavirus, quote, doesn't pose a new existential threat, close quote. Schwab has continually pushed for COVID to be exploited, to push for a new world order, claiming, quote, now is the historical moment of time, not only to fight the virus, but to shape the system for the post-corona era, close quote. However, he goes further in the book, making it clear that the financial elite will never allow life to return to normal, suggesting that rolling lockdowns and other restrictions will become permanent. Quoting, many of us are pondering when things will return to normal, close quote, writes Schwab. Quoting again, the short response is never. Nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory, close quote. The globalist makes this assertion despite admitting that the threat posed by COVID pales in comparison to previous pandemics.
I mean, to me, the key sentence that's quoted here in Schwab's written material, his book. And Schwab, of course, is one of the movers and shakers in this WEF, World Economic Forum, is, quote, the short response concerning will we ever go back to normal is never.
Yeah.
Quote, nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our, and here's the key words, global trajectory, close quote.
Yeah.
So they've got us on a fast track into globalism, away from nationalism. COVID is the perfect pretext for this, and they're not going to let up on this.
You know, we've been saying for quite some time in numerous episodes how the far left continues to take the crisis mentality to the next level, and this is it again. And the fact that they come right out and they tell you what they're going to do.
Yeah, global trajectory. What does that mean? The nation state dies, and it's got to be replaced by regional, supranational, transnational, ultimately global government.
Yep.
That's what they want. That's the way they think.
Yep.
Standing right in the way is Donald Trump.
Yes, thank you, Jesus.
Who wants to build a wall around America?
Yeah.
Now, that's not globalist. That's nationalist.
Yeah.
Who took us out of, and this is probably what sold me on Trump, you know, really getting behind him, when he took us out of the Paris Climate Accord,
Yeah.
which is basically this silly body that sits in judgment on our economic activities, an international body that we don't vote for. Trump says we're pulling out of that.
Yeah.
He pulled us out of the Iran deal.
Yes.
His campaign theme is MAGA, make not the world great again. See, they would love him if he made that his jingle.
Yeah.
Make the world great again, but he didn't say that. He said make America great again. He built the economy into a superpower house, not the world economy, our own economy, and he's on the precipice of doing it twice. And it's interesting that when you watch Donald Trump go out and travel, like when he travels to the UN, or when he travels to Davos, where this World Economic Forum was meeting, you can watch it on YouTube. He is right in their face. And he basically says, we will never, and he uses the word never, we will never become a socialist country.
Amen.
Or a Marxist country or a communist country. And that becomes the reason why they have to get rid of this guy, even if it means rampant vote cheating. And so it's interesting to me, Brother Jim, how many globalists are stepping forward now, and they are congratulating President-elect Biden. And in these tweets, they're using the expression President-elect. So they're banking that the rest of the population doesn't understand the process because there is no President, elect Biden at the present time.
That's right.
So here's Bill Gates. What does he tweet out here?
Congratulations to President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Thank you to the election officials and campaign workers who worked tirelessly to ensure a record number of Americans could cast a ballot and have it counted during such a challenging time for our country.
So we want President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, and he's a puppet for their one world agenda because he wants to cooperate with this global lockdown. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's the guy during one of the presidential debates, I think it was the second one or the first one, I can't remember, but he said, we are headed for, what did he say, a black winter or a dark winter?
A dark winter.
A dark winter. Yeah. What in the world does that mean? I mean, and what kind of optimism does that show for the future? Well, what he's telegraphing to the globalists is, I'm going to cooperate with your global lockdown when he says things like that.
Yeah.
And not to be outdone, here comes Mitt Romney, who has got to be one of the most duplicitous people in politics I've ever seen. And he tweets out the same thing.
Yes. Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill. I'm sorry, I have to pause. Okay. And admirable character, pausing again. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead.
Okay, now that's a Republican globalist. Here is a tweet from another Republican globalist, Jeb Bush, part of the Bush globalist dynasty. Remember, it was the Bush Sr. that used the term New World Order.
He did.
When he was in office from, 1988 to 1992. What does Jeb say?
Congratulations to President-elect Biden. I have prayed for our president most of my adult life. I will be praying for you and your success. Now is the time to heal deep wounds. Many are counting on you to lead the way.
And here's a tweet from Ben Jacobs, and he just writes, Karl Rove, who is the architect for the Bushes, is now congratulating Joe Biden in a Fox News phone interview. And, I basically wore myself out, Brother Jim, finding all these tweets. There's so many I could have added but didn't.
I know.
Here's some names you can add to the list congratulating President-elect Biden, in quotes, of course. John Kasich, a Republican. Bill Kristol, who claims to be a conservative. Now, this one hurts. Benjamin Netanyahu. That one shocked me.
Yeah.
Because look at all the things that Donald Trump has done for Israel, like the movement of our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the recognition of the Golan Heights, and here out comes Netanyahu congratulating President-elect Biden. And I found it interesting that Trump unfollowed Netanyahu recently on Twitter. I can understand why, and we're very pro-Israel.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, the Jewish people, I don't know what it is with them, they have a very difficult time figuring out who their friends are and who their foes are. And another one that just happened recently is the Pope, the religious voice of the New World Order, coming out and congratulating President-elect Biden. And so everybody that is congratulating President-elect Biden right now, you need to understand that, number one, they're agenda-driven. They're not being honest with you because they're not following the process spelled out in the Constitution.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if they got an R in front of their name or a D in front of their name. They're siding with the globalist agenda above and beyond the nationalist agenda. And I think things, Brother Jim, are just as simple and as clear and as black and white as that. Where am I going wrong?
I'm with you all the way. I absolutely agree with you.
So the whole issue is much bigger than Republican versus Democrat. It's globalism versus nationalism.
Yeah.
And the media, very sadly, are lapdogs or cheerleaders for
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
narrative war.
That's
And
right.
sadly, one of the casualties in this battle has been Fox News. Everybody is asking what in the world is wrong with Fox News? Why do they keep posting President-elect Biden? This is not the Fox News that I remember.
No.
They're following along with Facebook, Twitter, and everybody else that rejects this narrative. This is a narrative war, and the media is, and Fox News is as well. And they're all saying, congratulations, President-elect Biden, as if they have the authority to make that determination.
Yeah.
I mean, do they have the authority to make that determination? That would be like us, on Pastor's Point of View, saying, congratulations, President-elect Trump,
Yeah.
without the process going forward.
Yeah.
And people would just dismiss us and say they don't have the authority to make that decision.
Yeah.
Well, just like we don't have the authority to make the decision, neither does Fox News, neither does Google, neither does the AP.
That's right.
Neither do any of these other sources. So I would encourage people to go back and watch Pastor's Point of View number 138, because we warned people that this probably would happen prior to the election we were giving this warning. Remember, we did the piece on, what was her name, Faulkner Harris, on one of the shows with the earpiece in her ear. And the moment George Soros' name was brought up by Newt Gingrich, it was censored out.
Right.
We said, look, this is not a conservative outlet anymore.
That's right.
And we warned people about it. And lo and behold, here is Fox News. Not only are they calling certain states, not only do they call them way early,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
But they've also they were one of the first to put up this silly marquee of President-elect Biden.
They were.
And I was watching Fox News when this call was made, and they went right into Times Square, and they made it sound like Times Square was just jubilant, filled with people congratulating President-elect Biden, banking on the civics ignorance of the population. So Fox News has been extremely disappointing for conservatives, and we told you that would happen. And now let's explain the reason. We have this article from WorldNet Daily by Joe Kovacs, November 8th, 2020. The title of it is "We Did It." Wife of Fox News heir goes public after Fox declares Biden the winner. Catherine Murdoch lets everyone know where she stands politically. Now, it's not like there can't be good shows on Fox. Some of the evening shows that are more opinion shows can be very good. I'm talking about the news desk.
Right.
The news desk now is completely slanted.
And
tell us what she did in the aftermath of this.
Yes, all right, here we go. In the immediate aftermath of the Fox News Channel's declaration that Joe Biden was the next president of the United States, Catherine Murdoch, the wife of James Murdoch, whose family owns the network, proclaimed on Twitter, "We did it." The left-leaning Mrs. Murdoch had also tweeted on Election Day, quote, "What will you tell your children or your future self about the part you played in history?" Close quote. Her husband, James Murdoch, whose father is media giant Rupert Murdoch, was a member of the board of directors at News Corp, the parent company of Fox News, since 2013 until he resigned in July. At the time he stepped down, James indicated, quote, "My resignation is due to disagreements over certain editorial content published by the company's news outlets and certain other strategic decisions," close quote. Fox News has been at the center of national controversy since election night, when its decision desk made an early call for the state of Arizona's electoral votes going to Joe Biden instead of President Trump. On Friday, Catherine Murdoch tweeted, "Right-wing dictators are just as bad as left-wing dictators. Not sure why people can't see that."
Yeah.
Quote, "This is the first time where I've really decided I have a voice and I need to try to use it," said Catherine, who has long quietly supported climate change causes after Al Gore convinced her the issue was urgent in a 2006 presentation, close quote. This was reported by Britain's Daily Mail. Quoting, "The decisions we make in the next few years are going to have an impact on coming generations," she added. And she adds, "I need to know that I've done everything that I can possibly do," close quote.
So, what's going on at Fox News, Brother Jim? Can I put it this way? And correct me if I've got my history incorrect here. I think Rehoboam, was he not Solomon's son? If I remember right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got a Solomon-Rehoboam issue going on here. The values of the dad are not necessarily the values of the next in line.
True. Mm-hmm.
Can I make this a little bit more personal? We've got a Frankie Schaefer problem here.
Mm.
Can I get a little more personal about this, Brother Jim? We've got a Chuck Smith Sr., Chuck Smith Jr. / Brian Broderson problem going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we can give a lot of different examples where
Yeah.
the values of the founder, in this case Rupert Murdoch, are not the values of their sons, who are inheritors, of this empire. And so what we have is Catherine Murdoch, who's the wife of James Murdoch, whose family owns the network, proclaimed when they announced Biden as the president-elect, there's a tweet, "We did it."
I find that interesting. Does that not insinuate that there was some workings going on behind the scenes?
Sure. And she's obviously revealing her own biases, and she's preying off the ignorance of the people because she doesn't have the power to do anything.
No.
Because the states, with their votes, haven't even been certified yet, and the Electoral College hasn't even met yet. Here's another one of her tweets. I believe this was on Election Day. What will you tell your children or your future self about the part you played in history? In other words, we got to get rid of Trump, vote against him. And here's another one of her tweets where she tweeted out, "Right-wing dictators," now I think she's referring to Trump there as a right-wing dictator, are just as bad as left-wing dictators. Not sure why people cannot see that. So there's an old saying, Brother Jim, that a fish rots from the head down. And that's the problem with Fox News. And that's why you can't look to Fox News, regardless of them bringing on some good people from time to time. You can't trust that as a news outlet anymore. And so the whole drift at Fox News becomes understandable when you understand this change of ownership. And as ownership changes through the family line, the values of the family members are not the same.
Right.
Now, we've watched this happen, haven't we, with church after church,
Sure.
seminary after seminary, ministry after ministry. And so that's what's happening at Fox News. And it's actually been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
But we're just honest enough to tell you what's going on. So what would
Yes,
you
we
add
are.
to that?
I just, I saw where it said here in this article that she's a big supporter of climate change.
We forgot that one.
And that she was, convinced by Al Gore, which that ought to just say everything you need to say.
Yeah. So she was talked into. This was James Murdoch's wife, Catherine. Anthropogenic global warming, which is unbiblical.
Yes.
That's an unbiblical concept. Right. We've explained that in a prior show. And then her own husband, I think it was James, who had to resign in 2013 because he disagreed with Rupert Murdoch and the conservative direction there.
Yeah.
So all the tea leaves are there, the signs are on the wall. Take Fox News, folks, with an extreme grain of salt. And when they put up these silly banners about President-elect Joe Biden, just take that for the silliness that it represents.
Amen.
It's liberal bias.
Yes.
So liberal bias is infiltrated the entire media, including Fox News.
It has.
So let's go on, Brother Jim, to number 3, if we could, which is suspicious results. We've got a coattail with no coat.
That's right.
And
we really do.
Here's an article from the New American, and we're explaining to people why I think most of us that are conservative leaning look at this election as a fraud. And it's not just sour grapes. It's not just forget and move on. There's actually facts and documentation behind it. So we have this article from the New American by Selwyn Duke, November 6, 2020. And the title of it is First Coattail Election with No Coat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember Reagan would win landslides, and people would say, you know, the lower level, let's say congressmen or senators, they're riding on Reagan's coattails.
Right.
So if the liberal media interpretation of this election is true, I mean, what you have is all kinds of coattails, but no coat to ride on.
That's right.
And so first coattail election with no coat, GOP wins widely but Trump loses. Sorry, folks, this does not pass the smell test.
No,
But go for it.
doesn't.
Yeah, read that paragraph.
Does it make sense that a rising red tide should lift all boats in a carrier group except the carrier, whether it's the USS Donald Trump or not? This is basically what has happened this election. Do note, with Republicans apparently holding the Senate despite having far more seats to defend, gaining ground in the House, and adding a state legislature and one governorship, yet supposedly losing the presidency. As one commentator put it, quote, "This is the first coattail election with no coat," close quote.
So here is a tweet from James McComb, and he says, what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
Georgia voters reelected a very conservative Republican senator with a 100,000 vote margin of victory and then turned around and voted for Joe Biden. I do not believe that for a heartbeat. And
I agree with James McComb.
I don't believe it either. I mean, how can the Republicans hold the Senate? It looks like they will. Do well in the House, pick up seats in the House, but the head of the ticket everybody votes against. It just doesn't pass the smell test. Something obviously went haywire from about, 10:30 at night until 4 o'clock in the morning, roughly, in those 5 swing states to switch things.
Something's definitely rotten in Denmark.
That's exactly right. Now, here's an article from Joe Pollock, November 9th, 2020, in Breitbart. It says, poll, 70% of Republicans say the 2020 election was neither free nor fair. What does that say?
A new poll suggests that 70% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was neither free nor fair. The poll of 1,987 registered voters, conducted by Morning Consult and Politico, began before Election Day, though most interviews were done afterwards.
Now, do we understand how negative this is for the country when you get a poll like this and statistics like this, where literally half of the country, what were there, 70 million or 71 million people that voted for Trump? You have 70 to 71 million people generally that look at the election as if it was stolen and a fraud. Mm-hmm. So when one half of the country is disenfranchised, didn't the Lord say a house divided against itself cannot stand?
That's what he said.
I mean, if you let that sit with no, we're going to put up paper and cardboard so you can't see what's going on. Mm-hmm. We're going to prevent, as we covered last time, observers from observing. Mm-hmm. They've got to go way back somewhere with binoculars, and they're using COVID, as a pretext for all of this.
Exactly.
I mean, if this is allowed to stand with no analysis, no challenge, right, no examination, then you've got a divided country, and that's not good for the country.
That's right.
This is why the process needs to go forward. And you know what, folks? If it comes out that we're wrong and Biden won, then I can live with that.
That's right.
But I can't live with it right now.
Right.
Because it looks like it's been stolen. It appears like it's been stolen. And there's a big chunk of the elites telling us we don't even have the business of checking it out. Mm-hmm. And actually we're conspiracy theorists for wanting to check it out.
Right.
And if you let that stand, you've got a division right in the country.
Yeah, and we can't allow ourselves to be put in the position of being viewed as just having sour grapes.
Yeah.
This is much, much deeper, more significant than that.
That's exactly right. And, you know, think about this. Trump, as he went out, he had over tens of thousands of people at these rallies.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people he had. Might have been in the hundreds of thousands, for all I know.
Large
And
groups.
and you look at Biden, and he's got a few cars in the parking lot honking.
I think 50 at one of the last ones.
Or they've got you know, people in a room, and they're sitting in these giant bubbles or circles, so they don't allegedly contaminate each other.
Right.
And they're practicing social distancing, and a third to a half of those people sitting in those bubbles are staff members.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me that Biden, with that kind of turnout, beat Donald Trump with his hundreds of thousands of people at his rallies?
Yeah.
I mean, we would call this the smell test. This does not pass the smell test.
That's what I have to do.
We need to examine what is going on. So, oh, you guys, what do you know? You don't know anything. Okay, maybe we don't. But let's hear from someone that does. Sidney Powell was on Sunday, the Maria Bartiromo show, Maria Bartiromo, and she talks for about 6 minutes here covering this. Now, I want you to understand who Sidney Powell is. She is not only a great American, she's an attorney, and she is General Flynn's personal attorney, the one whom the Obama administration turned against and violated every legal rule in the book in the process. So this spans about 6 minutes, and I want you to hear truth from another source, and just to show you how a lot of people do not look at this election as something that's been free and fair. So, Brother Jim, you and I are going to listen to it here as it's being played for our audience.
Welcome back. President Trump's legal team, as you've been hearing this morning, is preparing for all-out war, beginning with a slew of new lawsuits this week, beginning with one in Pennsylvania tomorrow, along with what our next guest says is evidence of voter fraud. Sidney Powell is General Michael Flynn's attorney. She is fighting on the front lines of this battle as part of the president's legal team. Sidney, good morning to you. Thank you for being here. Can you walk us through what has taken place here as you see it?
Yes, there has been a massive and coordinated effort to steal this election from we, the people of the United States of America, to delegitimize and destroy votes for Donald Trump, to manufacture votes for Joe Biden. They have done it in every way imaginable, from having dead people vote in massive numbers to absolutely fraudulently creating ballots that exist only voting for Biden. We've identified at least 450,000 ballots in the key states that miraculously only have a mark for Joe Biden on them and no other candidate. If you look at Florida, where things were done right, you can see that that's how the rest of the country should have gone. But they also used an algorithm to calculate the votes they would need to flip. And they used the computers to flip those votes from from Trump to Biden, and from other Republican candidates to their competitors also. I think Doug Collins had the race stolen from him. I think John James had his race stolen from him. It wasn't just President Trump. There were many people affected by this. We have got to fight tooth and nail in federal court to expose this abject fraud and the conspiracy behind it, and get a recount and audits in every place it's needed, which is, frankly, most of the country.
So there are recounts going on right now. We know that in Georgia, you have a list of numbers of ballots with only Joe Biden on the ticket. You say it's 98,000 ballots in Pennsylvania, 80 to 90,000 in Georgia, another 42,000 in Arizona, 69 to 115,000 in Michigan, and 62,000 in Wisconsin. Sidney, if this is true, this appears systemic. Where is the Department of Justice? Where is the AG Bill Barr? If this is so obvious, then why aren't we seeing massive government investigations?
I don't know. We definitely should be. I mean, we're getting reports of all kinds of fraud. We've got getting an affidavit from a postal worker now who talks about having been ordered to backdate ballots. No ballots received after the polls closed on voting day should even be counted. We've got multiple states that didn't even follow the rules of their own legislature. That's a federal constitutional issue. There are at least 3 major federal issues here that will require the Supreme Court to resolve this case. And when the votes are really audited and the real votes are counted, Trump will win. He is the president, and he is in charge of this country.
Sidney, I want to ask you about these algorithms and the Dominion software. I understand Nancy Pelosi has an interest in this company. Let's take a break. We'll come back with that. I'm talking with Sidney Powell this morning on her legal strategy. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm back with Sidney Powell, who is part of President Trump's legal team in contesting this election. Sidney, we talked about the Dominion software. I know that there were...
Okay. Well, there was more to that clip, but we kind of phased out of it for the sake of time. But you get the idea. You're dealing with a pretty high-level credentialed person who looks at this election as if it's been stolen. Mm-hmm. And she went through in a concise way a description, that we've been trying to give over a couple of hours. Yeah. And so that was your first time seeing that, right? That's the first time I saw that. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I sort of felt like the reporter there, commentator there, saying that where's Bill Barr? Well, I guess he's on the scene now, but it sure took him a long time to get there.
Yeah, nothing like being late to the party.
Exactly.
So there you have it. And so this is coming from people that are far higher and more knowledgeable and more insiders than we are. And so this idea of being suspicious over the election results is shared by intelligent people that are in the know.
Yeah. Not just a bunch of numbskulls.
Exactly. And you see, this is the part of the narrative war that they don't want shown.
That's exactly right.
And that's why we wanted to show a little bit about it. So let's continue on and let's talk about compromised computers. Because one of the things that she mentioned, if you heard, was Dominion software or Dominion computers. By the way, I appreciated the expression systemic voter fraud.
Yes.
Because that word systemic is thrown at us all of the time. America is systemically racist. No, right. America is not systemically racist. America, at least in these 5 swing states, is systemically subject to voter fraud. Mm-hmm. And now we know what they were doing between 10:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. Not only were they bringing in ballots, but the people that voted on those ballots had one choice. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Mark Trump Biden, it was just Mark Biden. Trump wasn't even on the ballot. Now, you say, well, that's not true. Well, how do you know it's not true? When they won't let you observe what was happening.
That's exactly right.
And in the name of COVID, they make you, against state law and against a court order, they make you stand multiple feet away where you can't even see what they're doing via binoculars. Yeah. And then they've got cardboard on the windows where you can't see in. What are they hiding? Yeah. And if you're so sure it's not systemic voter fraud, then let us go in and do a recount or a separation between legal and illegal ballots.
It's very troubling when you hear the reports about these ballots coming in that have a presidential mark on them, but then there's no down voting whatsoever. Yeah, something's fishy.
Something is fishy. It
Very fishy.
Does not pass the.
We're talking about thousands of ballots.
Yeah. No. So that's how they made up the difference. Yeah. Now, we move into these compromised computers, Dominion software, and we actually have an article on this. Sidney Powell mentioned the Dominion computer system, and the article is from Warner Todd Houston from the Washington Sentinel, November 10th, 2020, and it says dozens of Michigan counties used compromised computer program to give Biden the win. dozens of Democrat counties in Michigan used the same compromised computer system to tally the votes that gave Joe Biden the win. So, and this happened in 47 counties.
Yeah.
In
47.
Michigan, of course, being one of those swing states where 16 electoral votes hang in the balance in a tight election. What does that article say?
It is becoming clear that dozens of Democrat counties in Michigan used the same compromised computer system to tally the votes that gave Joe Biden the win. Quoting, in Antrim County, ballots were counted for Democrats that were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said, quote, tabulating software glitches, you're going to hear that word a lot, and glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes, close quote. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties used this same software in the same capacity. Again, that was a quote. Michigan GOP chairwoman Laura Cox said, how many other counties will flip back to Trump when these compromised computer systems are double-checked?
Wow. So it's an issue with the computer in its tabulation, a 6,000 vote swing, and this was the same computer software that was used in 47 counties in a swing state.
Systemic.
And we have this tweet here from Donald Trump concerning Dominion software, or the Dominion computer system, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But what does Trump say in this particular tweet?
Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden.
Now, Sidney Powell mentioned Dominion, and Trump here is tweeting against Dominion, and all of the votes for him that were lost or deleted using Dominion. Dominion computers.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, if you look carefully at this Trump,
I was hoping you would
tweet,
mention this.
What does it say there in red?
Gee, look what that says. This claim about election fraud is disputed.
Now, that's the President of the United States. They're fact-checking right there.
Yeah.
And they're trying to discredit him. Why? Because this is a narrative war.
Doesn't fit their narrative.
Whoever controls the narrative will win this.
That's right.
And this is why even us at our little ministry, when I say we're going to talk about election fraud, whether on Facebook or Twitter, unless I phrase things correctly, that same goofy little notification will show up, because they are trying to discredit anybody and everybody, including small people like us and big people like the President of the United States, who are daring to shine the truth light, the light of truth, I should say, on this problem. Because if enough of us do it, they lose the narrative war.
That's right.
Right now, we're not in a physical war. We're in a narrative war. Whoever controls the narrative is going to win. And that's why Trump is trying to do what he is trying to do there on Twitter, arguing that the election was stolen. And if it wasn't stolen, why not do the examination process afterwards?
Exactly.
Why not let the process run its course?
Yeah.
And only after the process has run its course can the votes be certified, can the Electoral College meet, can you then have a president-elect, either Trump or Biden.
Yeah.
So here is a blog article by Leo Hoffman, and the title of it is Dominion Voting Systems. Firm at Center of Election Fraud Claims Has Ties to Globalist World Economic Forum and Soros Enterprise. Aha, that's why you guys started with the discussion of the WEF and the World Economic Forum. Because the World Economic Forum, if this article is correct, is pulling out all of the stops to electronically cheat in the election so they can push us faster into world government, having removed Donald Trump that nationalist obstacle.
Yeah.
So what does Mr. Homan say here in this article is he connects this Dominion computer system where all of these problems are taking place with the WEF and the quintessential globalist George Soros.
Most Americans have no idea that in the vast majority of states where electronic voting machines are used, final ballot tabulations are not handled by their state and local governments and haven't been for years. In the early 2000s, county and state governments began to farm out the tedious process of tabulating election ballots to private technology companies. It would be faster and more efficient, the tech giants promised. Many political analysts and journalists, myself included, warned back in 2003 and 2004 when many states were switching their systems over from actual paper ballots to this new electronic format that this would take us down a dangerous path. So when claims of fraud arise, it's almost impossible to find where exactly things went wrong. That's why election officials like to skim over such claims with, quote, "Oh, it was just a glitch. Nothing to see here. Move along," close quote. The politicians refused to listen to the cautionary warnings which were dismissed as, quote, prophets of doom, close quote, who just wanted to resist the tide of technological advancement in the modern era. They gleefully turned their election systems over to big tech. Fast forward to 2020, and everyone's worst nightmare has arrived. We are seeing the disastrous results of the decisions made 15 to 18 years ago in almost every state. Last Tuesday's presidential election was fraught with irregularities, and the most difficult ones to get to the bottom of will be those which involved, here it is, Dominion voting systems used by every one of the key battleground states whose ballot counts are being called into question. Dominion, quote, got into trouble, close quote, with several subsidiaries it used over alleged cases of fraud. One subsidiary is Smartmatic, a company, quote, that has played a significant role in the U.S. market over the last decade, close quote, according to a report published by UK-based Access Wire. Smartmatic's chairman, now listen to this, folks, is a member of the British House of Lords, Mark Malloch Brown, a former vice chairman of George Soros's investment funds, former vice president at the World Bank, lead international partner at Sawyer Miller, a political consulting firm, and former vice chair of the World Economic Forum, who, quote, remains deeply involved in international affairs, close quote. The company's reported globalist ties have caused members of the media and government officials to raise questions about its involvement in the U.S. electoral process. In January, U.S. lawmakers expressed concerns about foreign involvement through these companies' creation and oversight of U.S. election equipment. Think about that. Top executives from the three major companies were grilled by both Democratic and Republican members of the U.S. House Committee on House Administration about the integrity of their systems. Also in January, election integrity, listen to the word, activists expressed concerns, quote, about what is known as supply chain security, the tampering of election equipment during manufacturing, close quote. This from the Associated Press. Quoting, a document submitted to North Carolina election officials by ES&S last year shows, for example, that it was manufacturing operations in the Philippines, close quote. All three companies, quote, have faced criticism over a lack of transparency and reluctance to open up their proprietary systems to outside testing, close quote, the Associated Press reported. In 2019, the AP found that these companies, quote, had long skimped on security in favor of convenience and operated under a shroud of financial and operational secrecy despite their critical role in elections, close quote.
So I guess we can sum it up this way, Brother Jim. We've got some issues here.
I would say so.
We've got Dominion with its deleted 2.7 million Trump votes. And then we learn, and I like this article, it was a little long, but it connects how we started doing electronic voting and then how we started outsourcing it outside of our borders. And then it mentions Dominion, and then it mentions a subsidiary of Dominion, Smartmatic, whose chairman is a member of the British House of Lords, Mark Malloch Brown, and look at this, a former chairman of George Soros's investment fund, close quote. George Soros, of course, being the quintessential globalist, the quintessential anti-never Trumper.
Exactly.
And he's got the money to push his agenda. And this article or this blog piece talks about global ties, and it talks about the supply chain security, the tampering of election equipment during manufacturing. You say, well, this is all just conspiracy talk. Then let's have the investigation and see.
Exactly.
What are they hiding?
Exactly.
I mean, if it's all conspiracy talk, you think the arms would fly wide open for any type of introspection, or analysis, or investigation. Now we have a 3-minute video, and we're going to play that. Let's get that queued up. And as it's being queued up, let me just sort of explain it. A lot of people do not believe that electronic voting fraud can happen. And yet we've tapped in here to a website, and the source will be given as we play this video. It shows you in an election, I think about 2 years ago, involving a conservative, Matt Bevin, or maybe it's Matt Bevins, it'll show up on the screen. And you could watch it in real time, how his vote total goes down 500 votes, roughly, and his opponent's goes up 500 votes. And you can't see this until you catch it in real time. And this particular website caught this in real time. And you look at this, and anybody that's intellectually honest has to say you have to monitor computers very carefully, because there is such a thing as electronic vote switching, the very thing that Trump is accusing Dominion of doing.
Well, if this isn't true, Pastor, then why do we have virus software, antivirus software on our computers? I mean, come on.
And you used to do IT, didn't you?
I did used to.
And so you know a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's go ahead. This runs about 3 minutes, and this is CNN caught in the very act. So let's watch that.
And then I said, scroll down to the bottom. Who owns that page? Seidel. And that's when the discussion started. Now, this is some amazing video that you're seeing from CNN election night. And I want to go back and show you a little bit about this clip. First, I want to explain what's happening in this clip. What's happening in this clip is this is the live feed from Clarity Elections coming through the Associated Desk or Decision Desk HQ. So this is the live feed. You're seeing the database that Clarity has as it gets updated with votes, okay? And right now, and this little ribbon at the bottom, this is generated by CNN. And they update this a second after they get the update from Clarity up here. So let's just look. right now, Andy Beshear, who is the guy that upset Matt Bevin, the governor at the time, Andy Beshear has 673,948 votes. That ties to what the ribbon from CNN says. Same thing with Matt Bevin, 662,235. 662,235. Now, let me take you through, and real quick, I'm going to run it again. You're going to see, if you're watching just this gold, you're going to see a flash update, and then this guy's face fills the page, and then I'm going to show you what you really missed. So here we go. Watch the gold. The update's coming. Boom, there it updates, and now here's this guy. Now let me show you what you missed. We're going to drag this back frame by frame. And so here we are before the update, and now I'm going to start walking you forward. Watch the gold. Here comes the update from Clarity. Boom. There it is. So now the update, Andy Beshear has 674,508 votes. And look down below, Andy Beshear had 673,948. They haven't had a chance to update the ribbon because this is in split seconds we're looking now. So Andy Beshear has just gained 560 votes. That makes sense. That's what happens as more votes come in, right? Let's look at Matt Bevin. He now has 661,675. But look down below. He did have 662,235 at the exact same second that Andy Beshear has gone up 560 votes. Matt Bevin has gone down 560 votes. This is vote switching in the computer. And by the way, between the 560 gain and 560 loss, you have just seen 25% of the loss amount of this race happen in front of your very eyes.
So, and I want to thank, I think it was CD Media that put this together. When you look at this in real time, frame by frame, I mean, it was described very well that you see a switch in 500 votes away from the conservative Bevin. His name's not Bevins, it's Bevin, and given to the liberal Beshear.
Yeah.
And it's not until you see the two, the upper count and the ribbon below, that you can catch it. And you would never catch it unless you analyzed it in real time, moment by moment, second by second, frame by frame.
Right.
So I would encourage people to refute that if they don't believe that electronics cannot be used to rig voting systems.
Yes.
Oh, it's just conspiracy, then let's have an investigation.
Exactly.
It's just a conspiracy and this is just silly talk. Let's have an investigation to figure out what exactly happened. And let's not be announcing people as President-elect so-and-so.
Right.
Let's not rush to coronation until we get this figured out.
Amen.
All right. So you had seen that before.
I had seen that before. So
what's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm so glad he put that up there because just like you said, I could have been watching that live. I would have never seen that.
That's exactly
so
right.
So thank God for that gentleman that had the wherewithal to be able to go back and get down to the nitty-gritty on that.
Yes. All right. Having said all that, let's move away from compromised computers and let's move briefly into the state of Pennsylvania. One of the swing states that stopped the counting in the middle of the night, 20 electoral votes hanging in the balance, and you have a situation there where there was given an extension. The law said X, and they said, we're going to change the law, and we're going to allow people to turn in votes later, without signature verification also, by the way. Now, who made that change? The governor went to the legislature beforehand and tried to get that change made, and the legislature said no. So the governor instead went to the Supreme Court, and in this case, what was it? The Secretary of State, it'll come out in this article, made this argument before the Supreme Court, and so the Supreme Court changed the law a couple of days before the election to allow the extension after the election. And the problem is, this was judge-made law, and don't you learn in, I don't know, 5th grade civics that the legislature makes the law, the judiciary interprets the law, the executive branch enforces the law.
Yeah.
So they have judge-made law. They've done an in-run around the legislative process, and that's how they were able to manufacture votes in this swing state for Biden.
Yeah.
They broke their own laws to do it, and they changed the law illegitimately. Now, here is the perspective of Ken Starr, law professor. Was he not, what was he, the special prosecutor or the independent counsel during the Clinton shenanigans? This is obviously a guy of great countenance in the legal community, and he describes what's happening here in Pennsylvania as a constitutional travesty. And we have this article capturing Ken Starr's sentiment from zerohedge.com, Tyler Durden, November the 9th, 2020. The title of it is Ken Starr, Pennsylvania Ballot Extension, a Constitutional Travesty.
Yeah.
So they swung Pennsylvania by breaking the law and creating a constitutional travesty in their own state.
And very briefly, before I read this, it's interesting to note that Governor Tom Wolf, he knew what the law was because he went to the legislature, which was the appropriate thing to do to try to get his way, and they said no.
Yeah.
And then he did his in-round. All right.
So let's read about that.
Here we go. Former independent counsel Ken Starr has described the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision to allow late arrival mail-in ballots as constitutional travesty, saying that only the state legislature has the authority granted by the Constitution to set such terms. Starr said that the actions of the Pennsylvania court in allowing mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day contradicted the demands of the Constitution, which bestows only state legislatures with the right to set the terms for gifting their electoral college votes, not courts. The Democratic Party filed a lawsuit against the Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth and all 67 county boards after the state legislature rejected proposals by Governor Tom Wolf on the processing of ballots. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which has a 5-2 Democratic majority, ruled on September 17th, this is September, in their favor, saying that election officials can accept all mail-in ballots, including absentee ballots, up to 3 days after the election. Quote, "What happened in Pennsylvania over these recent weeks is a constitutional travesty," close quote, said Starr. Quoting, "Governor Wolf tries to get his reforms, his vision, as he was entitled to do through the legislature of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He failed. He then goes to the state Supreme Court, which by a divided vote accepted the substance of what Governor Wolf was doing and then added thereon nooks and crannies as well," close quote. Starr says that the words of the Constitution, quote, "Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors," close quote, make clear that only the state legislature can set such terms of the election. Quoting, "What the state Supreme Court did was utterly unconstitutional. So it's a lawless act," close quote, he said. Quoting again, "At this stage, the Supreme Court has a solemn duty in light of the nature of the issue and the stakes at hand to take the case," close quote. Starr said he agreed that the Pennsylvania court may have disenfranchised voters. Quote, "In fact, to count every vote, watch this, may be a crime under federal law," he said. Quoting again, "It's definitely a crime under state law if," and here's the key word, "illegal." U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito late Friday ordered Pennsylvania election officials to segregate ballots that arrived after Election Day. Alito granted a request by the state's Republican Party to separate mail-in ballots received between 8 p.m. on November 3rd and 5 p.m. on November 6th from those that arrived by 8 p.m. on November 3rd in accordance with state guidance. The justice, however, did not order the counties to stop counting, but instead ordered that, quote, all such ballots, if counted, be counted separately, close quote. The September Pennsylvania court ruling said that ballots received on or before 5 p.m. on November 6th that lack a postmark, a legible postmark, or other proof of mailing can still be counted and, quote, will be presumed to have been mailed by Election Day unless a preponderance of the evidence demonstrates that it was mailed after Election Day, close quote. Last year, Pennsylvania passed legislation that opened up mail-in voting to all comers for the first time. However, it did not offer any extension. The state Supreme Court said in the ruling there was a risk of voters being disenfranchised due to the Postal Service being swamped. Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice Max Baer, writing for the majority in the 63-page opinion, said the primary elections earlier this year were rife with threatened disenfranchisement of thousands of voters as several county election boards struggled with the unprecedented volume of mail-in ballot applications.
So, Pennsylvania has flipped in the middle of the night and beyond. It's now pro-Biden. Oh, then you look at the fine print. How did they do it? How did they flip Pennsylvania?
Wasn't quite overnight.
Yeah, it wasn't quite overnight. But the fact of the matter is they did it based on a law that's not a law.
That's exactly right.
The governor went to the state legislature and tried to get this passed. They wouldn't pass it. So he and his, Secretary of State got it done through the United States Supreme Court. And it's so bad that the state Supreme Court, it's so bad that the United States Supreme Court, Samuel Alito, wants to step in and did and tell them to separate ballots, those coming in before the deadline and those coming in after the deadline, according to existing state law.
Exactly.
Not the law that they just made up.
Yeah.
And I like what Ken Starr says as he's describing this. It's utterly unconstitutional. It's a lawless act. And then he says, in fact, counting every vote
yes,
could be illegal.
Yeah.
Because you're violating existing state law,
Exactly.
not the judge-made law that they invented. And this goes directly against the United States Constitution. Ken Starr here is quoting Article 2, Section 1, Clauses 2 and 3, which say in part, quote, each state shall appoint in such matter as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. So
Exactly.
this, close quote, so this business of electors and who's going to be an elector and who's not and how they're determined, that's a matter for the legislature.
Right.
Which the governor and the Supreme Court circumvented. Well, why did the state Supreme Court go along with this, Brother Jim? The same reason all of these laws are being broken. Don't you know there's a pandemic going on? Don't you know this is an emergency situation?
Yeah.
Don't you know that we've got mail-in ballots and people can't make it to the polling place?
Yeah.
And so they're suspending everything that's normative under the guise of this pandemic.
That's exactly right.
Now, how much of this comes out in the news? All you hear is Biden won Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
And you say, well, none of this is true. Well, then let's have an investigation and ascertain that.
There it
Can we
is.
do that before we start calling somebody president-elect so-and-so?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I can't help, Brother Jim, quoting from James Madison in Federalist Paper number 47. I love using the writings of the Founding Fathers at these junctures because I believe they are, as the prophet Amos sort of described in his day, the Mosaic Law, he described it as a plumb line. And the thing about a plumb line is it always is, it's weighted, so it tells you exactly what's straight.
That's right.
So if you hold up the plumb line to a house that's the foundation is not right and the walls are crooked or whatever. The problem isn't the plumb line.
That's right.
The plumb line is just exposing the crookedness. And that was what the Mosaic Law was in the days of the prophet Amos, as he uses that analogy. And I believe this is how you can use the writings of the Founding Fathers in our day as the plumb line. And as you look at the plumb line, you can see what's crooked and what's perverse and what's built correctly. So what does James Madison say in Federalist Paper number 47?
The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny.
The legislature makes law. The executive branch enforces law. The judicial branch interprets law. Simple, right? And James Madison says if those three powers get merged in any way, even if two of the three get merged, and even if it's done electively, the people want this, or if it's done by appointment, then this becomes the very definition of tyranny. So what is happening in Pennsylvania by the plumb line of the Founding Fathers, James Madison, is tyrannical.
That's exactly right.
He doesn't say here it's not it's tyrannical except if there's a pandemic. Then it's okay. James Madison doesn't say that. So if you merge the two together, you've got the definition of tyranny, and that's what the governor is doing with the Supreme Court by bypassing the legislature.
And people are ignorant and don't know government and civics. And so they just fall for it.
And they wouldn't know the difference.
That's right.
Fortunately, things have turned out a little better recently. We don't have to read this whole article, but it's an article by Ron Blitzer, November 12th, 2020, from foxnews.com. A Pennsylvania court, Secretary of State lacked authority to change the deadline 2 days before the election day. A judge ruled ballots that were previously set aside should not be counted. So I'm glad another court has sort of echoed what Alito has done.
Sanity.
And saying something not right is happening here. In fact, as we change our pages and go to page 10, can you just read that court order, that last paragraph?
Last paragraph? All right. The court concludes that respondent Kathy Boockvar, in her official capacity as secretary...
Now, she's the secretary, let's see, what is she?
Of the Commonwealth.
Secretary of the Commonwealth, functioning under the authority of Governor Wolf of Pennsylvania.
Yes. The court concludes that respondent Kathy Boockvar, in her official capacity as Secretary of the Commonwealth, lacked statutory authority to issue the November 1st, 2020 guidance to respondents' county boards of elections, insofar as that guidance purported to change the deadline for certain electors to verify proof of identification, close quote. Judge Mary Hannah Leavitt said in a court order, this was in line with the Trump campaign's argument, which was that there was no basis in the state's law to extend the identification deadline and that Boockvar did not have the power to unilaterally change it.
So let's hold up the coronation until we get all these inconsistencies resolved. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Let's move, Brother Jim, very quickly to the state of Michigan, where 16 electoral votes are hanging in the balance. And here's an article from pjmedia.com by Megan Fox, November 9th, 2020, and it's entitled Ronna McDaniel. Now, she's the chairwoman of the GOP. Ronna McDaniel presents 131 affidavits. Now, let's stop there for a minute. That's a sworn statement under the penalty of law.
That's right.
If you're lying, you're perjuring yourself, and you could get into a lot of trouble criminally for lying. So you've got 131 affidavits of people who are testifying to gross election fraud that they saw, eyewitness testimony, in the state of Michigan. The title of the article is Ronna McDaniel presents 131 affidavits, 2,800 incident reports of alleged voter fraud in Michigan, and yet the media still demands evidence for voting fraud. It's just absolutely unbelievable. What does that article say?
During a press conference Monday, GOP Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel presented evidence of alleged voter fraud in Michigan that Republicans think could have tipped the scales for Joe Biden. Quoting, "In Wayne County, Republican poll watchers were denied their legal right to monitor the election and purposefully kept in the dark. There are thousands of reports of poll watchers being intimidated and unable to do their job. And as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, 131 affidavits have been completed just in Michigan, with over 2,800 incident reports that have been submitted to us since Election Day. 2 new lawsuits were filed today by people who were working in Detroit, and a whistleblower came forward. Close quote. Watching the news these days is a lot like watching a Monty Python skit, because immediately after McDaniel gave her evidence and told the press where to find the affidavits, they demanded that she show, quote, evidence, close quote, of the alleged fraud." So 131 affidavits and 2,800 incident reports don't qualify as evidence, I guess. Quoting, "Do you know that fraudulent votes were actually cast?" close quote, said one intrepid news person. Kayleigh McEnany responded, quote, "Ronna just told you there were 131 affidavits filed in just Michigan alone. We are unaware of the reports of thousands of votes cast in Nevada that were not eligible. Right now, we would point you to that. That information is publicly available," close quote. This is the narrative they will go with on the evening news, and half of America will never hear of the 131 affidavits taken under oath or the 2,800 incident reports of alleged voter fraud. If McDaniel had shown them live footage of illegal ballots being cast, they would have continued to ask, quote, "Where's the proof?" close quote. "The entire thing reminds me of this Monty Python skit," he says.
So that's the media narrative, is there's no evidence of voter fraud in the November 3rd election. And then we produce 131 affidavits detailing 2,800 incidents where people are observing fraud taking place.
And it doesn't matter.
Under oath, under criminal penalty,
Yes.
if they're lying. And then you present that to the media in giant binders. And then they come back and they say, well, where's the evidence of voter fraud? Well, what do you think we just handed you? What do you think these written affidavits are? I mean, it's insanity.
It's laughable.
And
It's just absurd.
And we're rushing to coronate President-elect Joe Biden, who everybody says won Michigan with its very precious 16, electoral votes.
Yeah.
I mean, Brother Jim, we're in the midst of the greatest heist, perhaps in world history,
I agree.
taking place right before us, and we're losing the battle because we're buying into the wrong narrative.
Yeah.
We're not listening to the right people. Continuing on with Michigan, some of this we've already covered with software glitches, but here's a tweet from the Trump War Room. Michigan GOP chair: dozens of Michigan counties use the same software that caused 6,000 votes in one county to switch from Trump to Biden, let alone 47 counties.
Yeah.
Here's another tweet from Scribner News. Update: Michigan's Antrim County flipped to a win for Donald Trump after an election software glitch was fixed today. Revised totals now show that Trump won by an estimated 2,500 votes. And so Michigan, along with Pennsylvania, are 2 states to keep your eye on.
Yeah.
And these incidents, folks, we couldn't get into all of them. It would take too much time. Our show is too long as it is. These are just exemplary and not exhaustive of the things happening out there. And so for people to use the expression president-elect in this type of environment is just completely inappropriate, unacceptable, and naive.
Mm-hmm.
And every media source, major media source you turn on, it's got President-elect Biden, and he's got the 270 electoral votes he supposedly needs. But when you start looking at some of these key states going the other way, like Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the map sure starts to look a little different, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Notice this image from the Epic Times, and I think it gives a more appropriate representation of the Electoral College. You need 270 to win. And there is Trump with 232 and Biden with just 227. And hanging in the balance would be Georgia, Pennsylvania, which I think would go the Republican direction, given what we said earlier, Michigan, which we just mentioned, Wisconsin, and Nevada. So this race is far from over.
Yeah.
This is a virtual dead heat with a slight edge to Trump. And a few of those swing states go in the direction of the GOP. Trump wins this thing.
That's right.
And so I would say this, folks, there's a lot more grounds for optimism on this than what the media narrative wants you to believe.
Right.
What would you add to that?
I can't add anything else. That's exactly right.
All right, so let's go to our last category. This is the enemies list. You know,
Did you know you're an enemy? That's the question.
and did
right?
you know there's lists compiled against you
That's right.
because you don't think the right way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I first learned of enemies list, it was always in school, and it was always communists in history.
Yeah.
Compiling enemies list. I think the whole
Or the
concept,
Nazis.
or the Nazis. I think an enemies list is actually something that goes back to Joseph Stalin. And here we are in the United States of America in the year 2020, and what we learn is enemies lists are being compiled against constitutionalists and conservatives and Trump voters to the point where if your name is on the list, you shouldn't be hired for another job.
Yeah.
So
At
here's
minimum.
at a minimum. Here's an article by Luis Miguel, November 7th, 2020. The title of it is AOC and Leftists Call for Lists of Trump Supporters, and they want them to burn. Now, isn't that like Salem witch trial type stuff? Or what was it? Who was that group that went to liberate Jerusalem from the Muslims? What's their name in history?
The Crusades.
The Crusades, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The Spanish Inquisition, isn't it that kind of mentality? Well, here you see this on the left.
Yeah.
And what does that article say?
All right. The left in America has for months been preparing for the possibility of a Trump re-election win with threats of violence. But they're apparently poised to be just as vengeful and vindictive if they win. Voices on the left, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat, New York, are calling for lists to be kept of Trump supporters so that they can ostracize and otherwise punish when the election is over.
Let me interrupt you right there. Here's her tweet. She tweeted out recently, is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for what they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future. So all these people that are opposing us politically, we need to keep a record of them to use against them once we get the reins of power. Continue, please.
Then there's Jennifer Rubin, the neocon columnist, who went, maybe that was a slip of the tongue, Freudian slip.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that again. Then there's Jennifer Rubin, the neocon columnist, who went full liberal and joined the Washington Post after Donald Trump entered American politics. According to Rubin, those who support the president should never be allowed to hold public office, serve on corporate boards, or participate in other avenues of society. Former Obama staffer Michael Simon, in a since-deleted tweet, added that he wants retribution against everyone who ever worked for the Trump administration. Actress Janelle Monáe, who starred in Hidden Figures, A story celebrating the crucial role black female mathematicians played in NASA's space program.
Great movie, by the way.
Oh, it's a fantastic movie. Yeah. Tweeted in a since-deleted post, every American citizen who voted for President Trump, saying they should all burn. Now, I couldn't say what she actually said, just fill in the gaps yourself.
Yeah.
The Transition Integrity Project, an organization with ties to George Soros's Open Society Foundations and to the Chinese Communist Party linked think tank, the Berggruen Institute, has outlined several tactics the left and deep state plan to use to secure a Biden victory in the 2020 presidential election, including mail-in voting, suppression of speech via social media censorship, and, quote, street fights, close quote. The founder of the Transition Integrity Project, Niels Gilman, even called for the execution of former Trump national security official Michael Anton due to Anton's coverage of and critical opinion of TIP.
All right, so AOC, let's keep a list of Trump sycophants. Jennifer Rubin, those who support the president should never be allowed to hold public office.
Yeah.
Serve on corporate boards or participate in other avenues of society. What is she going to do? Put us in the gulags?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's Michael Simon. He wants retribution against everyone who has ever worked for the Trump administration. Here's this actress in a very good movie, but she says blank, cuss word. Every American citizen who voted for Trump, she indicated that they should all burn. Here is this TIP outfit where they're outlining tactics to be used against Trump supporters, including street fights. And here's Nels Gilman calling for the execution of Trump's national security advisor. Mm-hmm. Here, by the way, not in the article, but here is a tweet from CNN's Jake Tapper, and he says this: I truly sympathize with those dealing with losing. It's not easy, but at a certain point, one has to think not only about what's best for the nation, a peaceful transfer of power, but how any future employers might see your character defined during adversity. Wow. So here's what these people are doing. Not only are they cheating to steal an election, but then they want to take the reins of power and they want vengeance and they want retaliation against anybody who took the opposite view during the election cycle. That's what's going on here. And just to make sure that vengeance is exacted, we need to keep lists of all of these people. This is not communist Russia. This is happening right here in the United States of America. And that is one of the reasons I just pray to God that the Biden administration does not get power.
Tyranny.
Because if it gets power, you'll see one of the most wickedest administrations, if not in the history of the U.S., perhaps in the history of the whole world. I don't think I'm hyperbolizing
I don't think so either
when I say that. Let's conclude with a note of optimism, Brother Jim. I would say this in closing. Our prayers are working.
Amen to that.
Keep praying out there, folks, because I think the tide is starting to shift. I think God is hearing our prayers. Do you mind reading James 5, verses 16 through 18?
James 5, 16 through 18. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Then he prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit.
Amen. So Elijah altered the weather and topography and everything else just through prayer. And he was just a guy that put his shoes on one foot at the time, just like the rest of us.
That's right.
In fact, I was talking to my wife about this, saying, I can't believe this is happening. And her response was, I think our prayers are starting to work. I think the tide is starting to shift. Amen. And of course, where is our ultimate hope, Brother Jim?
Titus 2:13. Looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus.
So our ultimate hope is in the soon return of the Lord.
Yes, that's
Now,
right.
as we conclude, let me just make a couple of announcements. There is a lot of goofiness that's going on right now on Facebook and Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Silly notifications they're putting up trying to discredit people that go against the narrative. That's why this is a narrative war.
Yeah.
And we have been victimized by that also. So my intention is to stay on Facebook and Twitter as long as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the writing is on the wall. We're sort of, Brother Jim, reaching a point where censorship, particularly if Biden wins, censorship is almost inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
where voices like ours will be stamped out.
Yeah.
And so we have some backups. You can find us, and we have images where you can locate these things on alternative platforms. But you can find us on MeWe. We just opened an account there. You can find us on Parler. And we post things on Parler regularly. And you say, well, what about YouTube? What if YouTube censors you? We just opened a Rumbler account. What is it called? Rumble. I'm sorry, I thought it was Rumble.
Rumble in the jungle.
Rumble account. So look for us, and there's icons there on the screen where you can see where to find us. Find us on Rumble. Find us on Parler. Find us on MeWe, if I'm pronouncing that right. And that way, should Facebook and Twitter go Gestapo on us and start censoring us unfairly, then we have alternative platforms. But we wanted to get that out to you because unless I tell you those platforms are available, you won't know where to find us should we disappear. Mm-hmm. Now, if we disappear, it may be the rapture.
That might be the rapture, in which case, sorry.
Yeah. If we disappear from Twitter and Facebook or YouTube, the issue won't be us, okay? Yeah. You need to understand that right away. The issue will be them, and we will have moved on to alternative platforms. Right. So I wanted to get that message out quick just in case they delete us this week, which could very well happen, given our content. And so we've looked at, Brother Jim, a number of things, if I can find my organizational slide. That all of this relates to globalism versus nationalism. That's really what's at stake here. Yeah. And a narrative is being pushed by the media, even by Fox News. The results of the election are very suspicious, particularly when you look at compromised computers connected to globalists. There's an absolute legal war of tyranny taking place in Pennsylvania. Monkey business is going on in Michigan, and even an enemies list is being compiled against detractors from the proper narrative. And so that's why we are living really in tenuous times. Mm-hmm. And I honestly believe this, Brother Jim. How this gets resolved in the next few weeks is not just going to determine the next 4 years, it's going to determine every single election. Are we going to have free and fair elections from this point onward? Yeah. Any closing comments on your part?
I just want to come back to what we said a moment ago. If you haven't been praying, start praying, because God answers prayer. And, you know, the old saying, it's always darkest before the dawn,
yes,
is also true.
That's right.
God is in control, so let's trust Him.
And before we sign off, I just want to say goodbye to a ally in the theological world. I don't know if you ever knew Dr. Bill or William Watson of Colorado Christian College or Colorado Christian University. He, I think, was in his 70s, and he died in his sleep. Today is Friday. I think he died in his sleep Wednesday night. Oh. And he made tremendous academic contributions to our movement. Mm. Our movement that we teach here at Sugarland Bible Church is dispensationalism, pre-tribulationalism, premillennialism, and the big argument against our view is it's a late view. Mm-hmm. You're teaching a late view that arose late in history. Yeah. All of the critics of our view, like Hank Kennegraff and many others, that's their main argument. Yeah. Well, William Watson is actually in his book, Dispensationalism Before Darby, and many other similar works that he wrote actually went into history. And shows from primary source writings that this idea that the rapture doctrine came with John Nelson Darby in the 19th century is a false argument on its face.
Wow.
And he gives example after example after example, going way before Darby, where the rapture doctrine was taught in church history. And I haven't seen anybody tabulate, first discover, and tabulate the data the way Dr. William Watson did. And so I always had a great appreciation for him. I was a co-speaker with him at many different events like the pre-trib study group.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Brother Jim, the pre-trib study group meets just next month. I'm one of the speakers, and he was on the list.
Oh, is that right?
I was hoping to see him, and he suddenly passed away in his sleep. And so our hearts and prayers go out to his family at this time, and I just wanted to recognize his contributions.
Well, Amazon, here I come, because I don't have that book.
It's a great book to have. And at this time, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.